The acrid smell of burning metal and ozone filled Nira's nostrils. As consciousness slowly returned to her battered body, her luminescent blue skin, normally radiant with health, had paled to an almost translucent shade, and the delicate crystalline formations along her temples throbbed with each labored breath. The crash had been violent. Her reconnaissance vessel, no larger than a human automobile, had been struck by what her people called lightning spears from the surface dwellers' primitive, yet effective weapons. Nira's elongated fingers traced the cold, unfamiliar surface beneath her, metal, smooth, nothing like the organic compounds her people used for construction. As her violet eyes adjusted to the harsh artificial lighting, the reality of her situation became devastatingly clear. She was in a cage, no, a cell. The walls were stark white, interrupted only by a heavy door with a small window. The air tasted sterile, processed, nothing like the sweet atmosphere of Valthara with its floating spore gardens and crystalline mountains. Terror seized her heart as childhood stories flooded back, tales her sister Zeta had whispered during their youth about the savage humans of the third planet, how they tortured prisoners for information, extracting secrets through pain and degradation, how they consumed the flesh of other sentient beings and decorated their dwellings with the bones of their enemies. The Council of Valthara had always maintained that humans were the most dangerous species in their sector of the galaxy, beautiful from a distance with their blue-green world, but harboring unspeakable cruelty within. Nira's breathing quickened as she examined her surroundings more carefully. The room was small, perhaps 10 feet by 12, with a simple cot, a metal basin, and what appeared to be waste disposal facilities. No torture devices were visible, but she knew that meant nothing. The humans were cunning. They would bring their instruments when they were ready to begin. Her communications implant had been damaged in the crash, leaving her unable to contact her ship or home world, even if she could. Standard Velthran protocol was clear. Reconnaissance scouts captured by hostile species were considered lost. No rescue would come. The mission parameters had been explicit: gather intelligence on human defensive capabilities, avoid contact at all costs, return with data to support the upcoming invasion fleet. Now that mission lay in ruins, along with her ship, somewhere in the wilderness of this alien world. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond her cell, and Nira's entire body tensed. Multiple sets of feet, moving with purpose. They were coming for her. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious, hours, days, but clearly they had waited for her to recover before beginning their interrogation. How thoughtful of them, to ensure she would be fully conscious for whatever torments they had planned. The sound of electronic locks disengaging made her flinch. Nira pressed herself against the far wall, her knees drawn up defensively. Her people possessed natural empathic abilities, allowing them to sense the emotional states of other beings. But humans were notoriously difficult to read. Their minds were chaotic, layered with contradictions and shielded by complex psychological barriers. The door swung open, and her worst fears seemed realized. 3 humans entered, wearing dark uniforms that radiated authority and menace, and one in lighter-colored clothing. The uniformed ones spoke in harsh, clipped tones to the third, gesturing toward her with callous efficiency. Their words were incomprehensible, but their body language spoke of military precision and cold professionalism. But it was the third human that drew her attention and confused her empathic senses. He was tall for his species, with dark hair and skin tanned by their sun. His clothing was simple gray fabric that seemed practical rather than ceremonial. What struck her most were his eyes, brown, warm, and when they met hers, filled not with the cruelty she expected, but with something else entirely: concern. It seemed impossible. The uniformed humans departed, leaving him alone with her. Nira's empathic abilities finally found purchase in his emotional state, and what she sensed made no sense at all. Worry, gentleness, a desire to help rather than harm. It had to be a trick, some sophisticated form of psychological manipulation her people hadn't encountered before. The human, her guard, apparently moved slowly toward the center of the room, his hands visible and empty. When he spoke, his voice was soft, non-threatening. "I'm Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "I'm going to be looking after you while you're here. Nira didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakably gentle. It confused her more than threats would have. This had to be part of their strategy to lull her into false security before the real torture began. Marcus maintained his distance, seeming to sense her fear. He gestured to himself again, repeating his name, then looked at her with raised eyebrows clearly, asking for hers. When she remained silent, he simply nodded and backed toward the door. "I'll bring you some food," he said, his voice maintaining that same careful gentleness. "And we'll get those cuts looked at." As the door closed behind him, Nira remained pressed against the wall, her mind reeling. In all the stories, all the warnings, no one had prepared her for kindness, cruelty she could understand, could steel herself against. But this unexpected gentleness threatened to crack the defensive walls around her heart. She touched the crystalline formations on her temples, feeling their dull ache. The crash had damaged more than just her ship, it had shattered everything she thought she knew about these humans. As she waited in the sterile silence of her cell, one terrifying thought kept recurring. What if everything her people believed about humans was wrong? And if that was true, what did that make her a scout for an invasion fleet preparing to destroy an innocent world? The questions tormented her as she curled up on the narrow cot, trying to make sense of a reality that no longer fit the carefully constructed beliefs of a lifetime. Outside her small window, an alien sun was setting, painting the sky in shades her people had no names for. Soon, the human called Marcus would return, and with him, more of this bewildering kindness that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about the universe. True to his word, Marcus returned within the hour, carrying a tray that made Nira's empathic senses reel with confusion. Instead of the torture implements she had steeled herself to face, he brought food, actual nourishment that filled the sterile air with warm, pleasant aromas. Steam rose from a bowl of what appeared to be soup, accompanied by soft bread and fresh fruit that looked remarkably similar to the Velka berries of her home world. Nira pressed herself further against the wall as he entered, her violet eyes tracking his every movement. Marcus moved with deliberate slowness, setting the tray on the small table near her cot before backing away to give her space. The gesture was so considerate, so fundamentally at odds with everything she had been taught about human nature, that it sent ripples of cognitive dissonance through her mind. "I wasn't sure what you could eat," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying that same inexplicable gentleness. "The fruit is from our garden, completely natural, no chemicals." He pointed to each item on the tray, his movements careful and non-threatening. "The soup is vegetable-based. I figured, well, I hoped it might be safe for you." The empathic resonance of his emotions was overwhelming. Genuine concern radiated from him like warmth from a star. There was no deception, no hidden malice, just authentic worry for her well-being. It was so alien to her expectations that she found herself trembling, not from fear but from the sheer impossibility of it all. Marcus noticed her trembling and immediately stepped further back, his face creased with worry. "I'm sorry," he said, raising his hands in what was clearly a universal gesture of peace. "I don't want to frighten you. I'll leave this here for you." As he turned to go, something deep within Nira stirred a desperate need to understand. "Wait," she whispered in her own language, the word barely audible. Marcus stopped immediately, turning back with hope lighting his features. "You spoke," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I'm sorry, I don't understand your language, but—" He touched his chest, then gestured to her. "We'll figure it out. We have time." The word hung in the air between them like a promise, not the urgent pressure of interrogation, but the patient promise of understanding. Nira's hand unconsciously moved to her throat, where a deep gash from the crash still throbbed with pain. Marcus's eyes followed the movement, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "You're hurt," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. He pulled a small white box from his pocket, a medical kit. "May I have some medicine that might help." The request for permission stunned her. In all the scenarios she had imagined, none involved her captors asking for consent. Marcus waited patiently for her response, making no move to approach without her agreement. Nira found herself nodding, a small, tentative gesture that seemed to brighten his entire demeanor. He knelt beside her cot, opening the medical kit with practiced efficiency. His hands were steady as he cleaned the wound, gentle as he applied what appeared to be some kind of healing salve. "This might sting a little," he warned, his touch feather light against her skin. The medicine did sting, but only briefly, followed by a cooling sensation that eased the pain considerably. Through her empathic abilities, Nira could feel his genuine desire to help, his careful attention to her comfort. "There," Marcus said softly, securing a clean bandage over the wound. "That should help it heal faster." He packed up the medical supplies, but remained kneeling beside her, his eyes meeting hers with startling directness. "I know you probably can't understand me, but I want you to know no one here wants to hurt you, I promise." The sincerity in his voice, the emotional resonance of truth that her empathic senses confirmed, shattered something inside Nira's carefully constructed worldview. A single tear, luminescent blue like her skin, traced down her cheek. Marcus saw the tear, and his own eyes softened with compassion. Without thinking, he reached out, then stopped himself, his hand hovering inches from her face. "May I?" he asked again, that same request for permission. This time, Nira's nod was more certain. Marcus gently brushed the tear away with his thumb, the touch sending unexpected warmth through her entire being. His skin was warm, rougher than her own, but infinitely gentle. "What's your name?" he asked, pointing to himself again. "Marcus." Then he pointed to her, eyebrows raised in question. "Nira," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus's face lit up with genuine joy. "Nira," he repeated, pronouncing it carefully, respectfully. "That's beautiful, Nira." The way he said her name, with such care and attention, made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the tray of food between them like a bridge across species and misunderstanding. Finally, Nira reached for the fruit, her movements tentative but trusting. It tasted remarkably like the Velka berries of home, sweet and tangy with a hint of earthiness that spoke of rich soil and careful cultivation. Marcus watched her eat with satisfaction, occasionally pointing to different foods and saying their names slowly, clearly. "Apple," he said, indicating the fruit. "Soup, bread." Each word was a gift, a building block toward understanding. When she had finished eating, Marcus gathered the tray but hesitated at the door. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, his voice carrying a promise. "We'll keep working on this, together." As the door closed behind him, Nira touched her bandaged throat, still feeling the warmth of his gentle care. Everything she had believed about humans was crumbling like sand castles before an incoming tide. The stories of cruelty and torture seemed like distant nightmares compared to the reality of Marcus's kindness. For the first time since her capture, Nira allowed herself to hope. Perhaps there was more to these humans than her people knew. Perhaps there was more to this situation than imprisonment and interrogation. Perhaps there was a chance for something neither of their species had ever imagined possible: understanding across the vast darkness between stars. Days blended into weeks as Marcus continued his daily visits, each one bringing new revelations that challenged everything Nira thought she knew about humans and herself. Their communication had evolved from simple gestures to a complex mixture of broken English, Velthran phrases, and an intimate sign language they had developed together. "Today," Marcus said as he entered her cell, though it had begun to feel less like a prison and more like sanctuary, "I brought something special." He held up a small device with a screen. "It's a tablet. I've been loading it with images and basic translation software that our linguistics team developed." Nira's eyes widened as the device came to life in her hands. Pictures of Earth's landscapes appeared: rolling green hills, vast blue oceans, towering mountains capped with white snow. It was breathtakingly beautiful, nothing like the barren wasteland her people's propaganda had portrayed. "This is your world?" she asked in carefully practiced English, her accent making the words sound like music. "Our world," Marcus corrected gently, sitting on the small chair he had brought for their daily sessions. "Earth belongs to all life here, not just humans." The concept was foreign to her. On Velthara, territory was strictly controlled by the ruling castes, with lower classes having no claim to the land. "All life," she repeated, testing the words. Marcus nodded, swiping to show her images of vast nature preserves, animals roaming freely, diverse ecosystems protected by human law. We're not perfect, he admitted, his tone carrying the weight of honesty. We've made mistakes, hurt our planet in some ways, but we're learning, trying to do better. Nira studied the images, her empathic abilities reading the genuine emotion. Behind his words, there was regret there, but also hope and determination. It painted a picture of a species capable of growth, of change, something the rigid hierarchy of Valthara had never allowed. Tell me about your world, Marcus said softly, settling back in his chair. Over the weeks, these conversations had become the highlight of both their days. You mentioned someone named Zeta before. Your sister? A wave of homesickness washed over Nira as she thought of Zeta. Yes, she said, her voice distant. My blood bond. In your language, sister. She has gift for crystal song. Nira struggled to find the right words in English. She makes music with living crystals. Beautiful. Marcus leaned forward, genuinely fascinated. Living crystals. How do they work? Nira touched the crystalline formations on her temples, which had been gradually brightening as her health improved. Crystals grow from our emotional energy. Happy thoughts make them glow. Sad thoughts make them dim. Zeta could make them sing whole symphonies of light and sound. That's incredible, Marcus breathed, and through her empathic senses, Nira could feel his awe was genuine. What else? Tell me about your family, your daily life. As Nira spoke about her world, the floating gardens, the crystal cities, the complex social ceremonies, she found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Marcus listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly trying to understand her culture, not just extract information. What about you? Nira asked eventually, turning the tablet to show images of human families. You have blood bonds, family. Marcus's expression grew wistful. I have a sister too, actually. Rachel, she's a teacher, works with children. He pulled out a small device and showed Nira a picture, a woman with Marcus's warm eyes, surrounded by laughing human younglings. She always said I was too soft-hearted for military work. Soft-hearted, Nira repeated. Puzzled by the term, Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. Gentle, caring too much about others. She said I'd rather help someone than fight them. Nira studied his face, noting the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the genuine warmth that radiated from him. This is bad thing on your world. Not bad, Marcus said thoughtfully. Just not always understood, especially in my line of work. He gestured around the facility. Most people here see you as a potential threat, an enemy, but I see. He paused, searching for words. What do you see? Nira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus met her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze sent an unfamiliar flutter through her chest. I see someone who's scared, far from home, and nothing like what we were told to expect. I see intelligence, kindness, curiosity about our world. I see. He stopped himself, as if he had been about to say something too revealing. The moment stretched between them, charged with an emotion Nira had never experienced before. Her empathic abilities were picking up something from Marcus that made her heart's yes. She had to beat faster. It was warm, intense, and directed entirely at her. Marcus, she said softly, testing his name on her tongue. Over the weeks, she had grown to love the sound of it, the way it felt in her mouth. Yes? Why you help me, really? She had asked this question before, but never received a complete answer. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his emotional state shifting to something deeper, more complex. At first, it was just duty, making sure you were treated humanely. He paused, struggling with his words. But then I got to know you, your curiosity, your gentleness despite everything you'd been told about us, the way you light up when you learn something new, or how your crystals glow when you're happy. Nira touched her temples self-consciously, feeling the warm pulse of the formations there. They had been glowing more frequently lately, usually during their conversations. I started looking forward to these visits, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. Started staying awake at night wondering what we'd talk about the next day. And I realized, he took a deep breath, I realized I was falling for you, not just as someone to protect, but as someone I care about deeply. The words hung in the air between them like a confession of something impossible. Nira's crystals flared brilliantly, responding to the surge of emotion she felt at his admission. "Is that strange?" Marcus asked, worry creeping into his voice. "Inappropriate? I know we're different species, different worlds." Nira reached out, her elongated fingers finding his hand. His skin was warm, alien but somehow perfectly right against hers. "Not strange." She whispered, "I feel, same thing, heart warmth, for you." But her voice faltered. "But," Marcus prompted gently, not pulling away from her touch, "my people, they come here, soon, for war." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "I was scout, to find weaknesses, help invasion." Tears, those luminescent blue drops, began to fall down her cheeks. "I not want this anymore. Not want my people hurt your people. Not want hurt you." Marcus's grip on her hand tightened, but not with anger, with understanding, with determination. "Then we stop them," he said simply. "Together." How Nira looked up at him through her tears. "I am prisoner. You are guard." "How we stop war between worlds." Marcus smiled, that warm expression that had first confused and then captivated her. "The same way we learn to understand each other, one conversation at a time, one heart at a time." As he leaned closer, Nira felt the impossible becoming possible. In a sterile cell on an alien world, love was blooming between stars, offering hope for something greater than either of their species had dared imagine. The alarm shattered the peaceful morning routine that Nira and Marcus had developed over the past month. Red lights flashed throughout the facility as Director Hayes burst into Nira's quarters, his face grim with urgency. "We've detected ships," Hayes announced without preamble. "Multiple contacts approaching Earth's outer system. We need to know if they're your people." Nira's blood turned to ice. Her empathic abilities immediately picked up the swirling emotions in the room: fear, anger, desperation, and from Marcus, a protective fury that surprised her with its intensity. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing hearts. 18 hours, maybe less." Hayes replied. "Our defense grid is activating, but if this is an invasion force..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus stepped protectively, closer to Nira, his body language clearly defensive. "Sir, Nira has been cooperating fully. She's given us valuable cultural information, helped us understand that we're about to be invaded." Hayes interrupted coldly. "By her people who sent her here to scout our weaknesses. That's not who she is anymore." Marcus said firmly, his hand finding Nira's. "She's been trying to help us find a peaceful solution." Nira felt the weight of their hope, their fear, their desperation pressing down on her. Through the small window of her quarters, she could see human personnel running with purpose, preparing for what they believed would be a fight for their world's survival. "I can contact them," she said quietly, the decision crystallizing in her mind. "My people. The ship's communication array in the wreckage, if it can be repaired. I can send a message." Hayes frowned. What kind of message? A request for parley? Negotiation instead of war? Nira looked up at Marcus, drawing strength from his unwavering faith in her. "There are those among my people who question the Council's decision. If I can reach them, convince them that humans are not the monsters our propaganda claims. And if they don't listen," Hayes pressed. Nira's crystals dimmed as she contemplated the alternative. "Then at least we tried. At least some among your people will know that not all Velthrans wanted this war." Within hours, a team had been dispatched to Nira's crash site. The communication array was damaged but repairable, and soon Nira found herself standing before a makeshift transmitter, with Marcus beside her and a room full of anxious military personnel watching. "The signal will take time to reach the fleet," she explained, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. "And there's no guarantee they'll respond. The fleet leader is Commander Vexes, rigid in his thinking, traditional. But there's a chance?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying hope. "There's always a chance," Nira replied. Initiating the transmission sequence, she began speaking in her native language, her voice carrying across the void of space toward the approaching fleet. As she spoke, Marcus watched her face, noting the play of emotions across her delicate features. She was putting everything on the line: her reputation among her people, her safety. perhaps her life, all for a world that had been taught to see her as an enemy. The transmission complete, they waited, and waited. Hours passed with no response. Human defense systems came online. Weapons platforms that Marcus knew were impressive by Earth standards, but might prove woefully inadequate against advanced alien technology. The tension in the facility was palpable. It was Marcus's friend Kale who brought the news that changed everything. "We're getting a response," he announced, bursting into the communications room. "Multiple signals. Actually, it sounds like there's disagreement in their fleet." Nira's eyes widened as the translation came through. Voices of her people, some angry, some uncertain, others clearly swayed by her message of peace. "They're arguing," she breathed, her crystals beginning to glow with hope. "Some want to continue with the invasion, but others are questioning the wisdom of attacking a species that has shown me such kindness." Over the next several hours, the situation became increasingly complex. The Veltheran fleet had effectively split into two factions, those loyal to Commander Vex's original mission, and those swayed by Nira's testimony about human nature. "There's going to be a formal challenge," Nira explained after listening to the latest transmissions. "Admiral Theron, he's more moderate than Vex, has called for a traditional Velthar. A trial by testimony, you might say. Representatives from both sides will present their arguments, and," Marcus prompted, "they want me to testify in person." Nira's voice was steady, but Marcus could sense her fear through their growing empathic connection. "I would need to be transported to their flagship." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "It's too dangerous." "What if it's a trap?" Hayes, who had been listening to the exchange, shook his head. "We can't risk it. You're too valuable, and we have no guarantee of your safety." But Nira was already shaking her head. "This may be our only chance for peace, if I can convince enough of them. Show them that I've been treated with honor and kindness." She looked directly at Marcus. "If I can show them what I've found here, what we've found, maybe they'll understand that war isn't necessary." The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Marcus felt his heart breaking at the thought of Nira returning to her people, not knowing if he would ever see her again. "There's something else," Nira said softly, her voice barely audible. "If I'm going to convince them, they need to see the full truth. They need to understand that humans and Veltherans can." She paused, struggling with the words. "That we can love each other." Marcus felt his world shift on its axis. "Nira, what are you saying?" She turned to face him fully, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm saying that I love you, Marcus Chen, not just as someone who has been kind to me, but as the being I want to spend my life with. And if I'm going to risk everything to stop this war, you deserve to know that." The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Marcus was vaguely aware of Hayes and the other personnel in the room, but all he could see was Nira, brave, beautiful Nira, who was willing to sacrifice everything for the chance of peace. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Which is why I'm going with you, Marcus." "No," both Nira and Hayes began simultaneously. "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "If this testimony is about showing them what humans are really like, about the possibility of our species coexisting, then they need to see us together. They need to see that love can bridge any gap, even the space between stars." As alarms continued to sound around them and to fleets prepared for potential war, Marcus took Nira's hand in his, their fingers intertwining like the fates of their two worlds. "Together," he said simply. "Together," Nira agreed, her crystals blazing with light. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since the invasion fleet had been detected, there was hope that love might indeed conquer all, even the vast darkness between worlds. The transport ship that carried Marcus and Nira to the Veltheran flagship was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Crystalline walls pulsed with organic light, and the entire vessel seemed to breathe around them. But his wonder at the alien technology was overshadowed by concern for Nira, who had grown increasingly tense as they approached her people's fleet. "They'll question everything," she warned him as they prepared to dock. "Our relationship, my loyalty, whether I've been somehow corrupted by human influence. Some will see you as proof that I've betrayed our species." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the subtle tremor in her fingers. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Together, remember?" The docking bay of the flagship was vast and filled with Velthrons of various castes and ranks. Marcus felt hundreds of alien eyes upon him as they disembarked, some curious, many hostile. Nira's people were beautiful in their diversity, some tall and willowy like her, others broader with more pronounced crystalline formations, all sharing that luminescent blue skin that had first captivated him. Admiral Theron approached them, his bearing regal and diplomatic. His crystals were deep purple, indicating high rank and advanced age. When he spoke, it was in accented but clear English. Nira of the scouting caste, he said formally, you have created quite a situation. The fleet is divided, accusations of treason have been made, and you bring a human to our sacred halls. Admiral Theron, Nira replied, straightening with dignity, I bring proof that everything we believed about humanity was wrong. This is Marcus Chen, who has shown me kindness when torture was expected, friendship when I was prepared for hatred, and love when I thought it impossible. A murmur rippled through the assembled Velthrons. Commander Vex, a stern figure with blood-red crystals denoting his military rank, stepped forward with obvious disdain. Love, Vex spat. You speak of interspecies contamination as if it were something pure. This human has clearly manipulated you, corrupted your loyalty to our people. No, Marcus said, stepping forward despite the hostile glares directed at him. I fell in love with Nira because of who she is, her courage, her curiosity, her compassion, the same qualities that brought her to Earth in the first place. Seeking knowledge rather than conquest, the formal trial began in the flagship's great hall, a magnificent chamber where living crystal formations grew from every surface, creating natural acoustics that carried every word clearly to the assembled crowd. Representatives from both factions presented their arguments with passionate intensity. Commander Vex spoke of duty, tradition, and the necessity of expanding Velthron territory. He painted humans as dangerous primitives who would eventually threaten Velthron space, making preemptive action not just wise but morally required. Admiral Theron countered with questions about the ethics of unprovoked invasion, the value of diversity in the galaxy, and the potential benefits of peaceful contact with other species. But it was when Nira took the witness platform that the real transformation began. I was taught that humans were monsters, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. I was prepared to die rather than be taken alive by such creatures. Instead, I found beings capable of extraordinary kindness. She told them about Marcus's gentle care of her injuries, his patience in learning her language, his genuine interest in her culture and world. As she spoke, her crystals began to glow with increasing intensity, the emotional resonance of her words affecting every Velthron present. You speak of one individual, Vex interrupted. This proves nothing about their species as a whole. Then let me show you, Nira replied. She activated a device Marcus hadn't seen before, a memory crystal that projected three-dimensional images into the air above them. The assembled Velthrons watched in stunned silence as scenes from Earth played out before them. Children playing in parks, people caring for animals, acts of selfless heroism during natural disasters, communities coming together to help strangers. Marcus recognized some of the images. They were from the tablet he had shown Nira, but she had somehow recorded and enhanced them. This is what I discovered, Nira continued as the images played. A species that, yes, has capacity for violence, but also for incredible beauty, creativity, and love. They make art that rivals our crystal symphonies. They protect creatures weaker than themselves. They sacrifice for those they've never met. The final image that appeared was of Marcus and Nira together, taken by facility security cameras during one of their conversations. In it, Marcus was showing her something on the tablet, both of them laughing at what appeared to be images of Earth animals. The joy on both their faces was unmistakable. This is what I found on Earth, Nira said softly. Not just knowledge about human military capabilities, but something infinitely more valuable, the possibility of connection across species, across worlds, the possibility of love. Marcus stood then, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon him. Nira taught me about your people, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Your love of beauty, your complex social bonds, your spiritual connection to living crystals. She showed me that intelligence and emotion take many forms throughout the galaxy. He paused, looking directly at Commander Vex. Yes, we're different species. Yes, we have different cultures, different ways of seeing the universe, but we're not enemies unless we choose to be. Nira and I, we chose love instead of fear, understanding instead of suspicion. The hall erupted in heated discussion as the implications of their testimony sank in. Some Velthrons remained unmoved, committed to their original mission, but many more seemed shaken by what they had witnessed. Admiral Theron called for order, then announced the traditional vote that would determine the fleet's course of action. One by one, each ship's captain stood to declare their position. The count was closer than anyone had expected, but when the final tally was announced, the peace faction had won by a narrow margin. Commander Vex accepted the decision with military precision. Though his crystals remained dark with disapproval, the fleet will withdraw and establish peaceful communication protocols with Earth, he announced. But I want it noted that this decision may endanger our people's future, and I want it noted, Admiral Theron replied, that this decision may secure our people's future in ways we never imagined. As the formal proceedings concluded, Nira faced a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could return to Velthara as a hero who had prevented an unnecessary war, or she could choose a different path entirely. I request permission to remain on Earth as a cultural liaison, she announced to the assembly, to help build bridges between our peoples and ensure that the peace we've achieved today continues to grow. Admiral Theron smiled, his crystals brightening with approval. Permission granted, Nira of the scouting caste. You have served our people well, in ways perhaps greater than any warrior could. As the Velthran fleet prepared to depart Earth's system, Marcus and Nira stood together on an observation deck, watching the beautiful alien ships begin their journey home. Some would return eventually as ambassadors and cultural exchange representatives, but the immediate threat of war had passed. No regrets, Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Nira leaned back against his chest, her crystals glowing with contentment. Only that it took a war to bring us together. 6 months later, they stood together again, but this time in a garden on Earth where flowers from both worlds grew side by side. Representatives from both species had gathered to witness something unprecedented, the first interspecies union ceremony, combining human and Velthran traditions. Nira wore a gown that seemed to be made of starlight itself, while Marcus had chosen traditional Earth formal wear enhanced with crystalline elements that pulsed in harmony with his bride's natural formations. As they exchanged vows in both languages, promising to love each other across any distance, through any challenge, the assembled crowd witnessed more than just a wedding. They witnessed the beginning of a new era where love truly could conquer. All, even the vast darkness between stars, as their lips met in their first kiss as husband and wife. Nira's crystals blazed with such brilliant light that even the stars seemed dim by comparison. And in that moment, both species knew that the universe had become a larger, more wondrous place. The future stretched before them, filled with challenges and discoveries. But Marcus and Nira would face it together, living proof that when hearts connect across the cosmos, anything is possible.